Welcome to A Practical Guide to the College Essay, and welcome to the beginning of College Guidance Network's partnership with the New Hampshire Department of Education. All year long, we will have programming live like this, as well as access to all our college and career planning resources, including the new personalized roadmap. And today, like I said, we're here to talk about college essays in a practical guide, and I can't think of a better first institution and first guest than my friend Kim DeRego, who is the Vice Provost for Enrollment Management at the University of New Hampshire. Welcome, Kim.
Thanks so much. I'm really glad to be here.
So we're going to be using the Q&A button on your Zoom display to ask all your questions about college essays. So feel free to go in there now and start throwing in your questions. We're going to, we got a ton of questions during registration, so we'll try to get to some of those. And we'd love for you to put your questions in the Q&A. And we're also going to be using the chat. So maybe those of you who have Zoomed in here could just go to the chat and share, if you're a parent and a student together, what grade you're in and maybe where you are in the college process. Assumedly, since you're here, you've not yet finished your college essay, or maybe you finished it and want to make sure you did all the right things. Kim, I want to start with just kind of a really basic question, and that's about kind of what specific qualities are you looking for at the University of New Hampshire in a successful college essay?
Yeah, it's a great question. And, I'll just say to start, the college essay is probably the topic that we hear the most from students with the highest stress level. They are the most nervous about getting it right and getting it perfect and not being like everyone else, and yet being enough like everyone else who goes to the school that they get admitted. It just is such a source of stress for students. And so I really do want to start by saying that we wish that wasn't the case, and it really shouldn't be. A college essay is a part of the application, but it's certainly not, even really for most schools, the most important part. The most important part of your application really is all of the work that you've put in, both academically and your extracurriculars and other things ahead of applying to college. So first and foremost, sort of take a deep breath about the college essay and don't try to not have that be such a source of stress. That said, we read every essay at UNH. We get 25,000 applications. We read 25,000 essays every single cycle. And we really do rely on the college essay to tell us a couple of things about students. Number one, and this might seem basic, but it's really important, is that the student can write. Writing is a huge part of college, and you would be shocked how many typos, grammatical errors, incorrect college names are left in college essays when they are submitted. So
I've read a lot of on my side of things as well, so I'm not shocked at all.
Yes. So there's that. And then once we get past the mechanics of a good essay, we want to know something about who you are. It doesn't have to be everything about who you are, but it is something about who you are and what you will bring to our campus. Extra bonus points if you have really been able to think through why the qualities that you bring match the qualities of UNH. And I know the average student is applying to 8-10 colleges. And so you should be writing 8 to 10 different essays, if at all possible. And so, for instance, UNH is really well known for our experiential learning, for the students who study abroad, who get internships, who do different kinds of experiential research and things like that at our campus. And so if a student was to tie in something about their background with the experiential learning that's available at UNH, that would really show us this student has thought about this. This student has thought about UNH. And so that's another thing that we would really be looking for. So that's really where we would start when we're looking at a college essay.
That's really helpful. And if you have questions for Kim or for me, go ahead and put them in the Q&A. And I think part of the reason, Kim, that folks are so intimidated by the college essay, or it gets so much hype, is that students aren't always asked that often in their schooling to talk about themselves, right, to write about themselves. They're writing research papers, they're writing analytical essays and things like that, but they're not asked to speak about themselves. And so do you have any tips for kind of as they're starting to write, how to kind of dig into who they are? I mean, that's a big task, right? It's daunting to write about who you are. So just any tips on kind of how to ease into it?
Yeah, so I give a couple of different tips. First, the Common App, a lot of schools are on the Common App, and the Common App offers several essay prompts. So sometimes when students start their application process and they haven't actually looked at the application, they're thinking, I need to write an essay about anything in the world. That's not actually true. The Common App has some very organized prompts that give you a topic to write about. So first and foremost, I would go into the Common App and look at the essay question options that you have. And thanks, it looks like it just got put into the chat. So that would be the first thing, because for a lot of students, that's all it takes to sort of spark something or remind them of something. And they can choose one of those essay topics and go from there. Now, sometimes students worry that if they choose one of those set topics, they're going to sound like everybody else. And so they go for, I believe it's the last essay question, which is basically tell us anything else. And they want to be super, super unique. I think we should not worry too much about gaming the uniqueness of the system. If one of those essay prompts jumps out at you as something that you could write about and talk about, you absolutely should pick the thing that immediately sparks your interest, rather than search for something that is unique to only you in this world. So that's really where I would start with the process.
Well, and at the same time, you shouldn't feel so confined, I think, to those topics on the essay, because there really is that topic of your choice. And so students aren't dinged for not choosing one of those topics. And I think oftentimes students get kind of stifled by the prompts, like they read them and they're trying to fit themselves into those. And so they should also have the freedom to write whatever they want, right? And
Absolutely.
I mean, I think a lot of college admission readers I've talked to have said when they're reading the student's application, they often don't even know what prompt they're responding to. I mean, they're not kind of figuring out, oh, they're answering prompt number 3. They're just reading that essay to get a sense for the student.
Exactly.
So there's a couple questions coming in the Q&A. One is, how different should a college essay look for an artist, if at all? So if you want to study art, should it be separate? So it's different than otherwise.
Well, so the way it sounds like the way the question was worded is for an artist, and I think what we're assuming in the answer is that this student is applying to an art program and intending to major in art or some sort of an art. So
or studio art major or something like that, yeah.
So if we're assuming that, and this actually applies this can apply very broadly. Writing about why you want to do what you've applied to is a good thing. That is a good thing. Telling us why you want to be a mechanical engineer is something we want to read about. That is good. Similarly, telling us why you want to be an artist is also good. So that would be great to see, but it doesn't have to be that. And particularly in the case of art, for most institutions, especially institutions with that are art schools or have very good art programs, you are required to submit a portfolio of your work. So one thing I like to say about the college essay is it should tell us something that isn't evident somewhere else in the application. And your art skills are going to be evident by the portfolio that you submit. So in that case, you don't necessarily need to say, I want to be a painter because I'm an excellent painter and I've worked really hard at it and I've done a lot of good paintings, because we will see your paintings as a part of your application. So you can say, this is why I want to be an artist. This is how art makes me feel. This is who I am as an artist. This is how I've been impacted by art in my life. All good essay topics. But you don't need to explain that you're a good artist and you like doing art, because we will see that in your portfolio.
Right. I think that's one of the biggest mistakes that students make is being redundant in the college essay, right? Repeating things about their activities or interests or things like that admission readers can see in other parts of the application.
Yes. And we try not to get frustrated, but it is a little frustrating when you have read in a different part of the application, a statement, and then you see it again in the essay, you're like, yeah, we got it. I got it. So do try. That's where uniqueness is good. Tell us something that isn't elsewhere in the application.
Yeah, I mean, it might be helpful for folks to understand kind of as people read applications, what's the cadence? How do they go through the application, and when do they get to the essay, in terms of the recommendations and all that kind of stuff?
Such a great question that I'm not sure I've ever actually been asked, but is really actually very important. So the first thing we look at is your college transcript. The first, I mean, we look at your name, we look at where you're from. Sorry, the high school transcript. Yes, of course, your high school transcript. And if you've submitted any dual enrollment credit or a college credit, we're looking at your academic record. First and foremost, the school needs to be able to look at that academic record and answer the question, yes, I feel that this student can be successful in this academic environment. Sometimes parents tell me if a student gets denied, this is the worst thing you could have done for my child. And I will say, no, the worst thing I could have done for your child is to admit him or her and then have that child have a bad experience and fail and not be able to do the work. And so that is our most important step, is looking at that academic transcript and saying, yes, this student can do the work. I am confident. So once we get through that, then we're looking at the other parts of the application. Most people will look at that point at the essay and read the essay and then go to the letters of recommendation. That's usually the way it goes. But they don't have equal weight. The transcript has far more weight in the admissions process than the essay.
So they'll get to the essay before they get to the recommendations?
Yep.
Okay. So, if a student is writing an essay about a specific topic, maybe they want to mention that to their recommenders, just so they have a sense for what they're already covering in the essay. You mentioned earlier, there's a question here from Julia about, you were saying students might be writing 8 to 10 different essays, and Julia is saying, I've never heard that recommendation. And is it feasible for students, or can they upload one essay? And I think what you were talking about is supplemental essays, right? So there's the one main kind of personal statement / college essay that students will, if they're using the Common App, will submit to all colleges. But then there's supplemental essays that different schools have.
There are, but I will clarify, and this is confusing, and I can see why this would be confusing. If you're going to put the name of your college in your essay, it has to be 8 different essays, because we see all the time students who will say, I'm so inspired to go to this other school, and they clearly just uploaded the same essay several times. So that's when you do really need to make sure you fix that.
I would recommend highly against ever putting the name of a school. Yeah. Show your interest in other ways, but that is ripe for error.
Yes, but Julia is exactly right. You do not need to write 10 different essays on different topics. Absolutely not. Sorry, that would definitely make the stress worse.
But if you are applying, especially to some of the most selective schools in the country, a lot of them have pretty significant supplemental essays. And so planning ahead for the fact that you might have to write, if you're applying to 10 to 12 colleges, you might have to write, in addition to your main essay, another 5 essays.
That's right.
So that's important to know. And I think in terms of the main essay, I always recommend that students not just write one essay, that they write a draft of one essay, let it sit for a while, see how they feel about it, and then pick up another topic and write about that, just to have something to compare it to. So you don't feel like you're stuck with one topic, and you can look and say, okay, this is something that I think really represents me well as compared to the other essay.
Yeah, and there are several very practical tips as well. I mean, I often tell students, write your essay and then throw out your first paragraph and see, can the rest of your essay stand without that first paragraph? In that case, you didn't need it. That often is helpful. I also tell students, read your essay out loud to yourself, to others. You will be amazed how many grammatical and just language issues are fixed by reading something out loud and hearing it said. And so if more students did that, I think we would see, generally better essays.
That's true. And I like what you say about that first paragraph, because I'm the type of writer that likes to write myself into a essay. And so usually that whole first paragraph is pretty meaningless. It doesn't really get to the meat of things. And what about the idea of a college essay as kind of a moral, like moral to a story? Do you need to have it? Does it need to be some parable? Do you need to say, and then I learned that this was true, and does it have to have some kind of grand conclusion?
It has to have a point. So it can't just be a story about the best soccer game you ever played with no point. And so I hesitate to say a grand moral finale, that you pull everything together, but it does have to have a reason why this amazing soccer game that you played is a part of who you are and shaped who you are. It does have to have something to do with that.
Why it's meaningful to you. Right. Yeah. I mean, but it doesn't, too often I see students kind of compelled to say, and this changed how I viewed, my whole life. And this was, this is not pitiful, this pivotal moment where I recognize this, and now my whole perspective on life has changed. And this is how I think that is a kind of a false narrative that they don't need to worry about.
Yeah. And in fact, some of the best essays that I have read have very small sort of finales. They talk about something that might not have been meaningful to someone else, and it was very meaningful to me. But it's not a huge, change in life or change in perspective that the student had.
Yeah. So if you have questions for us, feel free to put them in the Q&A and we'll answer them as they come in. Is it advisable, Kim, for folks to seek professional editing help? That was one of the questions that came in. You talked about getting the grammar right and being able to write well and things like that. Should it be, do schools want kind of an unpolished essay, or do they want this really well crafted, kind of error-free piece of work?
Well, we want both, Brennan. We want both. So I want to be clear, I do not think professional editing help or paid editing help is necessary for a college essay. Definitely do not think that. I think that every student that I have ever worked with or known has people in their life, parents, school counselors, teachers, who can be absolutely key to making sure this essay is good. Remember, we are counting on this essay being the student's writing, and we are counting on it telling us, yes, this student can write. So if you find yourself in a situation where you're thinking we have to have professional editing help, or this won't work, then we have some other problems. So I do not think professional paid editing help is necessary. And I would say that every student I've ever worked with has been able within their own network to get help. Now, that said, everyone, even your best writers, should have someone else proofread it, should have another set of eyes on it, because sometimes we see students and we'll look at a transcript and see straight A's in every English class, including APs, IBs, everything. And then a typo that should have been caught in the essay. And it's just a mistake. It's a human error. It's in your eyes, correct them as you read, and so get help.
Yeah, you don't send things out from UNH that you haven't had people look at, right? And I do some writing for Forbes, and my good friend Jill Teeters, who's the one of the college counselors at the Dairyfield School down in Manchester, she reads all my stuff before it goes out, just as a second set of eyes, and just kind of catching things that, like you said, I never noticed. But I think students run the risk of having too much editing sometimes, and losing their voice in the writing. So yep. I think admission officers can tell very quickly if it's a student writing an essay, or if it's a 40-year-old, 50-year-old parent writing an essay, or over editing an essay.
And to that end too, I actually don't advise overusing the thesaurus, because it's real obvious to us when a student has had a pretty solid essay and then went through and sort of upgraded all the words, because it just doesn't read well. And it's not how anybody reads or writes or anything. And so I think, it might sound counterintuitive, but actually the simplest language is really the best when you're trying to tell a story or tell us who you are.
Yeah, I had a friend in high school who was applying to college, and he was dead set on using the word plethora in his college essay because he thought it was going to make him sound smart, right? Like, instead of saying, we had a lot of this, we had a plethora, and
Yeah.
it just wasn't him. It didn't fit with the rest of the essay. There's a question here about how to start an essay. The question is, should I jump right in or paraphrase the prompt? And I would say, don't repeat the question.
No,
Again,
right.
it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I mean, maybe when you're first writing the draft, it's all right to do it. But then take it out, because I don't think you don't need to say, the one time that I had a challenge that I faced was. You can just jump in. And I actually, and you can add to this as well, but I would say at the beginning of an essay, just drop the reader in a moment, right?
Yes,
Really vivid images, because if you start with this kind of, I'm going to tell you a story, and it's too wordy, then you're going to lose the reader right away. But if you start with a moment like, the leaves were changing and the bright colors dropping around me, whatever it is going to capture them a lot more than this one time when I was at, my track meet. Just doesn't
right.
rest.
And remember, these are human readers. We have not gotten to the place where AI reads our essays and paraphrases them for us. We are human readers in admissions offices reading essays, and we're reading lots of them. So yes, because of that, also, I think you are well served to start quickly and get to the point.
Yeah. And there's another question here from Joseph. Is there anything you are specifically looking for when you read an essay, like a green flag of any kind?
No,
I've never really heard of a green.
I know, a green flag, like
because
drop in the word plethora and you're in. That's
yes,
it.
right. Are there any things that you're really looking for as you read essays, like, this is what we need to see?
No, I mean, most institutions are looking to create a class and create an environment for their students that is as impactful and positive as possible. That means having diverse voices and people from all backgrounds and all walks of life on your campus. And so there's no one thing that we want to see that is definitely in. And in fact, we want all kinds of different voices at the table. So I would say you absolutely, there's no sort of right answer, that if you get that, you're definitely coming in.
Well, and to that point, there was a question that came in during registration that the writer said, my Indian heritage is a fundamental part of my identity, but it has not caused me challenges. Is it still okay to write about?
Yes, I think this is actually a little bit of a misconception that we hear this a lot. People who think, I need to write about my most challenging thing that ever happened to me. And some people feel, I don't really have anything that was that challenging or challenging enough to be worthy. We don't necessarily need to see that you've struggled or had hardship or suffered at all. We really, again, want to know who you are. And so, yes, absolutely. If your Indian heritage or any other identity is important to you, that is really important for us to read about in the essay. And so I think that would be a great thing to write about.
Well, and I think this is, I know you probably can't comment on it much, but, in the Supreme Court case recently about race conscious submission, that was one of the things that was mentioned, that, if a student wants to talk about their identity or their racial background or their ethnicity, they can do that in a college essay, and that can be considered as part of their story. Whereas just kind of checking a box as to their race or identity cannot be considered in the same way. And so,
yeah, and I can comment a little on that. So at the University of New Hampshire, the state of New Hampshire, for our system schools, we have been prohibited from state statute since 2012, I believe, from using any protected class in our admission criteria and our admission review. So we've actually we have a lot of experience looking at the whole student and have been doing this for years and years and years. And so, what we do is we are looking for a student to explain to us, who are you? How has your identity had an impact on you? How have you changed or grown or become who you are because of that? And that's, that is absolutely an appropriate thing to put in the essay and to tell any reader about in that essay. And I do think for schools who are still really striving to make sure they have a diverse campus and aren't used to working in this environment, they'll probably be adopting more of our method, which is to read the essay and to look at the whole student and how their identity has impacted them.
There you go. New Hampshire, first in the nation, once again.
Leader in many things.
So I think if there's other questions, we can answer them. But as we start to wrap up, I want to ask you if you have any kind of final question or final tips for people to as they kind of proofread, start to think about, is their essay done? And I'll add one, which is I always think it's a good idea for a student to give their essay to somebody who doesn't know them at all. So give it to their parents and have their parents give it to somebody at work, or give it to a friend and have their friend give it to their parents or somebody they don't know, and have that person read the essay. And then in one sentence or in a couple adjectives, say what they learned about that student from that essay. And then, it comes back to you and you can tell if you've done your job, right? If that person has shared what you think you wanted to convey, then you've done a good job. And I'll while you're thinking of some tips, I will get to this other question. How do you recommend we format our essays? Should we include a header? Should we break up our essay into paragraphs?
Paragraphs, definitely yes. Header, not necessary, but we do see it from time to time. But I don't think it's standard. Paragraphs, yes, though. You want to format this just like your English teacher has always told you should be formatting essays. Main point, supporting evidence, conclusion. And you can start with a bang, you can end with a bang, you can take some creative license within there, but it's got to flow the way that an essay should flow. And remember, we are using this to really confirm for us the student will be able to write essays in every single class that they're taking on our institution. So if we see something too wild and too creative that leaves us wondering, but do they know that an introduction and some supporting paragraphs and a conclusion make up an essay? That's not a great thing.
Yeah, and there will be formatting issues with the Common App. So they don't need a title. You can preview, if you're applying via Common App, you can preview your whole application and you can see what the essay looks like, but don't try any kind of crazy formatting because it gets messed up when you enter it into the Common App.
And we know that. We know not to blame you for that. So don't worry about it.
And somebody asked earlier how many words, and the Common App limits it to 650.
Yeah, they're not too long.
Right. So thank you, Kim. This is great. The one question I would love to, maybe you've come up with an answer, I would love to end on is, if you were writing a college essay today, what would you write your college essay on? What topic?
It is a great question. And, it's hard to answer that question with all of the things that have happened to me since I was a high school student. I have a family, I have 4 children, I have, a job that keeps me pretty busy. But frankly, I have had, there have been a lot of people in my life who've been really impactful to me, and experiences that I have had with other cultures and with travel that were really, really impactful to me. So it would probably have something to do with getting outside of the area and the culture that I was raised in, and experiences that I have had getting to know other people. And I've thought about this. I'm not sure who I would choose, but there would be probably a description of meeting that person, getting comfortable, getting to know that person, and then how I was impacted by that person who was outside of my sort of comfort zone in the beginning.
See, I thought you were going to go with the fact that with 4 children and the job you have, maybe the power of a good nap.
Yeah, I wouldn't know. So that would be a hard essay to write.
Well, thank you for joining us this evening.